What's going on YouTube, and welcome back to another episode of Then We Eat. I think it's time to go back to the brisket well here today. So on this week's episode, we're going to be making roasted brisket in an onion gravy. So before we get started, please don't turn the video off. I know I said onion gravy. If you don't like onions, you may be a little concerned at this point, but don't panic. I don't like onions either, and this recipe is still very good. So stick with me and try it yourself. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do here, I have a heavy cast iron pan, large enough to fit my brisket. That's very important. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna add 1 tablespoon of vegetable oil to our pan. Try to spread it out over the whole pan. So once you've got that spread out over the pan, we're gonna stick it in the oven. We're not looking to burn this oil, but we do want the oil to start to shimmer a little bit. So we're gonna stick it in the oven and we'll let it shimmer. And while that oil is heating in the oven, let's pat dry our brisket. Okay, so I've got roughly a 6-pound brisket here. So we're just gonna put some salt and pepper on the whole thing. So once you've got this thing salt and peppered to your liking, we're gonna stick it in that roasting pan with the shimmering oil. And we'll stick it in the oven. All right, so now we'll stick our meat into that pan. All right, so we're gonna cook this in a 375-degree oven for half an hour. Okay, so while our brisket is in the oven cooking for a half an hour, let's get started on our onion gravy. First thing we're gonna do, we're gonna heat 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil over medium-ish heat. Now we're gonna add our onions. I have 3 pounds of cooking onions here. I've cut them into rings. Basically, you just want some rings that you can fry up. So we're gonna add 3 pounds of onions to our pan. And we're gonna let those cook down. You do wanna be careful with this step. We're not looking to fry onions to like a fried onion for steak or something. You're kind of looking to sweat these down until they start to turn golden brown. So you kind of wanna do it slow and don't rush this process for sure. My pan may seem a little bit small for this, but don't worry, as the onions cook down, they're gonna take up a lot less space in this pan. Okay, as you can see, the onions are much more brown. They've cooked quite a bit down. So we have to continue to cook them until they're a deep golden brown. The one thing we need to do right now is we need to add a teaspoon of smoked paprika. We're gonna kind of fry that with the onions, let that paprika flavor kind of come out. One thing about adding smoked paprika to this, it's gonna bring that deep golden brown color out that much easier. As you can see now, they're already almost turning kind of red. I should also mention, I'm not sure if you can see it in any of the cameras, but just behind me here, I have got the brisket taken out. These onions took longer than a half an hour, so I just pulled that brisket out. I'm just letting it sit for now while we finish the onions, and then we can throw it back into the oven. Okay, and once we have those onions to a deep golden brown color, let's add 3 cloves of garlic. We're gonna fry that for approximately a minute or so. Once that garlic's cooked for a minute or so, we're gonna add some liquid. Now this liquid's gonna do 2 things. Number 1, it's gonna turn your fried onions into more of a gravy. Number 2, it's going to deglaze your pan as well. So let's add our liquid. We've got 2 cups of red wine and 1 cup of beef broth here. We're gonna give this a stir, and we're gonna try to scrape some of the bits off the bottom as best we can. Just using your spoon or spatula or whatever you're using, just kind of scrape the bottom as you give it a stir. What we're gonna do here is we're going to continue to cook this until it comes to a boil. And while we let that cook down, one of the nice things about a recipe like this is if you're hosting a dinner party and you don't wanna have to go away from the dinner party to cook dinner, this is the perfect recipe. You cook it the day before and you just have a very short finishing touch the day of. Perfect for a dinner party. Okay, now that this has come to a boil, we're gonna remove it from the heat. Now we've brought our brisket back. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our onion mixture, we're gonna pour it over the top, cover the onions over the brisket. Now we need to cover this with a lid. Unfortunately, we don't have a lid for this pan, so I'm just gonna be using tin foil. Now we do need to leave the lid half ajar. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put the tin foil over most of the pan, and I'm gonna leave the edges exposed, with the idea being that that would be the equivalent of having the lid half ajar. So there we have it, that's it. We're now gonna return the brisket to the oven for approximately 3.5 hours or until tender, but we are gonna check it every hour. Make sure there's still lots of liquid in the pan. We do not want the pan to cook dry. If it starts to become a little too dry, we'll just top it up with some more beef broth. So into the oven for 3.5 hours it goes. In case I didn't mention it before, when you cook it for a half an hour, and again when you cook it for 3.5 hours, you want your oven at 375 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, so we're back. As you can see, the brisket is well cooked now. I have taken this out and let it sit for an hour. You're going to want to do that. Now, we can carry on with the rest of the recipe, which is basically just put it in the fridge overnight. So you're looking for this to be tender. Ours is fork tender. The fork goes in and comes out pretty easily, and it has cooled. It went in a lot easier before I let it cool. So now we're just gonna scrape the onions off. So once you've got it with all the onion knocked off, we're gonna wrap it in tin foil. All right, so this is nice and wrapped up. We're gonna stick this in the fridge and we're gonna leave it there until tomorrow. Now that we've got the beef put away until tomorrow, let's save that onion gravy. So we're just gonna take everything out of that pan. We're gonna put it into a bowl. So there we have our onion gravy. Now don't worry about any fat drippings that may have gone into the pan as well. Before we cook this again tomorrow, we are going to clean the grease out of it, and it should form a nice spot on top. It'll be a lot easier to take out than it is now. So just dump it all in and we'll clean it out tomorrow. So this will also go in the fridge until tomorrow, and we'll see you tomorrow when it's time to start cooking our final product. Okay, the brisket's been resting overnight. Let's finish this up. So one of the last things I talked about last night before we put this in the fridge was a layer of fat on our onion gravy. As you can see, there is a layer there. You can basically just kind of spoon it off. Okay, so there we have it. That may not be exactly every bit of it, but it's a pretty significant amount. So I'm gonna call that good to go. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna transfer that to a measuring cup. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna top it up to 3 cups with beef broth. I'm almost at the 3 cups already, so I'll just top it up to where I need. It's not gonna be very much. Now we're gonna take our onion mixture, we're gonna pour it into a blender, and we're gonna blend this up until it's nice and smooth. There we go. As you can see, that's pretty smooth now, so we'll call that good to go. So now we need to heat our gravy up. So I've got the induction cooktop back up. We're gonna add that gravy to our cast iron frying pan. You're gonna want a cast iron frying pan or something that's oven safe, because you are gonna then take this gravy and put it into the oven. So we'll pour our gravy into the pan. It is a little thick right now. As you cook it down, it will get a little thinner, so you don't have to worry too much about it being way too thick. And if you find it is a little too thick for your liking, just add a little bit more beef broth. While we're letting this gravy come back up to temperature, now would be a good time to turn your oven on. So we're gonna preheat our oven to 350 degrees. While our onion gravy is coming up to temperature, let's get started on our brisket here. Okay, so let's start working on our beef. We're gonna cut this against the grain. What we mean by that is, you can see these little fibers or grains here on the edge of this brisket that run in this direction. So when you cut your meat, you want to cut against that. So in this case, it's running this way. We want to cut it this way. We're just going to cut these into slices. Okay, so I've cut enough beef here for what I think we need for dinner. So I'm just going to set that aside and we'll wait for onion gravy to come up to temperature. Okay, so as you can see, our gravy is now boiling away a little bit. Trouble with this induction is it's a little bit too small for this pan, so the center's boiling, the outside not so much. I stirred it around a bunch. It should be pretty warm. So now what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead, we're going to put our brisket into our gravy. I'm going to give this a little bit of a stir around, try to submerge as much of this brisket as we can. Okay, our brisket should be pretty well submerged at this point. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to stick this into that 350 degree oven for about a half an hour, and we'll see you when it comes out. Okay, the brisket has now come out of the oven. As you can see, the gravy did get a little thinner, and it did cover all of the brisket. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna stick it onto a plate and show you the finished product, give it a taste, see how it is. All right, so I got it onto the plate. The first thing you're gonna notice when you go to plate this up, the beef has become very, very tender, almost fall apart, which is exactly what you want. So let's go ahead and give it a taste and see how it tastes. As you can see, it kind of just pulls away from itself. Very, very tender. Get a little bit of that gravy. That is very good. The beef is extremely tender, kind of buttery in your mouth in a way because it just kind of melts away. It's perfect. That onion gravy does taste like onion, not overpowering. It's very, very delicious. So that's it for this video. Hit like if you liked the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, hit the notification bell to be notified when we upload next. We upload a new video every Friday at 6 a.m. The recipe is always in the description box below. Share the video with all of your friends and let us know in the comments below. What video would you like to see us make next? Or better yet, what did you think of this recipe? Have you had a chance to try it? If you have, let us know in the comments below. Oh, and don't forget, first we cook, then we eat. So good.